Hey y'all, we're doing things a little bit different this go round, just because I heard from some of you that you love to see more of the spaces that I've been moving through. And so I'm currently in Chiapas in the mountains, believe it or not. It probably looks like it's really warm, but it's not. And so the sun is out, it looks beautiful, the mountains are beautiful, great, but come 4 hours from now, it's gonna be freezing and dropping below probably 40 degrees. But nonetheless, I am grateful, and I'm really grateful for all of you supporting me during this journey, and especially for those of you who have been on this journey for at least a year now and have probably seen the transformation of my work and the offerings and have continued to just see the vision and be supportive. And so I want to say a tremendous thank you to you, and especially to those of you who have also just recently joined to continue to support my work and the things that I'm developing, which I shared with you last week, as well as to, participate in, I hope to be like dialogue on these posts. And also, I'm also here to answer any questions that you may have. So at any point, if you want to ask me anything or request anything specifically from me, I'm happy to do that. I will say I am not an influencer or a vlogger or anything like that. Like this, all of this is just straight from the heart, straight from me, authentically, genuinely, raw. That's it. Like, I'm not trying to impress anybody. I just want to be myself and put work out there that hopefully invokes dialogue. And so today I wanted to share with you a video essay about my experience at Chamula, just because I think a video, one, hello, the setting is just, it's magnificent. And two, I think it'll be easier for me to explain all the things that I saw and experienced in a video form. So hopefully you like it. If not, don't worry, there'll be more writings coming soon. So you're probably wondering, why the hell am I in Chiapas? That's a good question. Because I was not planning to come here. I was planning to go straight to Oaxaca for my residency next week and, just spend some time before the residency started and then, start the residency. I was not planning on making a stop in Chiapas at all. However, I did receive a message from a woman in the market who I had never met before. She was Mayan, hardly spoke any Spanish. And she just kept looking at me up and down. You know how sometimes your aunties look at you up and down, like trying to assess what you're about? That was definitely her. And she even stopped the person I was walking with and was like, who is she? Where's she from? And long story short, from her, I received the message that I need to go to Chamula. Had never heard of Chamula. And so I was like, okay, maybe, I don't know if this is an actual thing I should do or not. Turns out she is the community bruja or curandera, if you want to use that language, of that specific Mayan community. And so when I heard that, I was like, okay, maybe she was tapping into the ethers and received a message or something and was giving it to me. Fast forward, I actually do come here, and a few days ago, I'm in a deep meditation using plant medicine, hape, to really just ground myself and understanding like why I'm here, what is it that I'm supposed to receive from this place. Believe it or not, I don't know how many of you believe in ancestor work, practice ancestor work, but I do, and it's something that I've been working with for quite some time. And so I've had one ancestor with me for a while, and he has not really spoken before. He has been with me, he'll direct me, I know he's there to protect me, but he hasn't really spoken. And so when I was in meditation a few days ago, he actually spoke for the first time and told me that he's from Chamula. And that's why he told the woman to tell me to come here, so I could come, understand where he's from, and in some ways also understand a bit of myself. And I will say, I was very skeptical at first of like, did I really just hear him say that? I don't know. I was just very, very skeptical because I did not ever, not once did it cross my mind to have an ancestor from Mexico, primarily from this place called Chamula, which I'll get to next. And the reason why I was skeptical of that is because I have seen, just the appropriation of so many indigenous, Mayan, Olmec, Aztec cultures and customs, and I did not want to be one of those people that just subscribe to, okay, I'm also indigenous. Or some people who are African descent, they say, oh, I'm not black, I'm indigenous, and that includes Aztec, Mayan, and Olmec somehow. Not to say that there aren't people who are of African descent, of course, in Mexico, but I have seen a wave of people, primarily who do like spiritual new age things, who tend to want to prop up indigenous Mayan and Aztec practices and really co-opt them and take them on as their own. And I'm just not down with that. And I never felt that in any way I needed to, prop up one culture's practice over another. The African diaspora is spread wide, literally around the world, and so I never felt the need to discount my connection to the diaspora by claiming I was somehow indigenous or Mayan or Aztec. So when my ancestor told me that he was from here, I was really like, what does that mean? And this is an ancestor from my lineage, so I was like, okay, I guess this must be true, because I'm here, I received the message, and then my ancestor told me he's also from here. So different forms of confirmation told me to come to Chiapas so I could travel to Chamula. So what is Chamula? Chamula is a community here in Chiapas, which I just learned recently, is considered to be one of the quote-unquote most interesting and rebellious communities in all of Mexico, because they are almost 100% Mayan and have been able to retain all of their traditions, customs, practices since pre-colonialism. They were some of the strongest tribes of indigenous people to resist colonialism. And to this day, you can see how they have been able to retain their sovereignty, and they even have their own rules that, technically they're in Mexico, technically they're in the state of Chiapas. However, everyone knows in Chamula, anything goes according to what their rules are. So that I kind of loved when I learned about that. And at the same time, I was very intrigued to go and see who are these folks and why are they considered to be so interesting. And in some things that I read, they were considered dangerous and odd and strange and primitive and savage, and just like all this language that is very much rooted in white supremacy. So I went to Chamula to visit the communities, but also to go to one sacred site, which is supposed to be the most different, again, church experience in all of Mexico. Why is that? Because on the outside, it looks like a regular church, and I'll share some photos of it. But on the inside, which you cannot take pictures of, all the traditions and everything happening within there is indigenous. It's pre-colonialism. It is very much probably like unlike anything most people have seen. However, when I went there, believe it or not, it felt very familiar. And so walking in, seeing that there were no pews at all, the floor was concrete, there was pine needles everywhere. They covered the floor. It almost looks like grass. It wasn't completely, like a dirt floor or anything. It was a concrete floor. But they put pine needles down because pine needles represent life and they represent fertility. Almost like the ceiba tree, if you're familiar with that, and other Mayan cultures around Mexico, some of them believe in the ceiba tree. Here in Chamula, they really believe and hold tightly onto the pine tree as their source of life and fertility. And so I immediately saw that. To the right, when you walk in, there's this big pool that looks like almost like a bowl, which is used for what we who are familiar with Christian traditions may call like a baptism. But of course, it was not called that for the indigenous communities there. It really was used as a way of forming protection, blessings. Sacred water was used there, and it's only on, I believe, the 24th of June every year that people are able to come and receive those blessings and cleansings through that sacred water that's kept there. Continuing in, you begin to just see candles everywhere. And I mean everywhere, not like on a shelf per se or a table. I mean, someone may just stop right in front of you, strike a match, light the bottom of a candle and stick it in the floor in front of them and light the candle so that it will stay stuck there, and begin doing an invocation. There were families around, there were live chickens there to be sacrificed. There were young children there who were also participating in these festivities, which I thought was beautiful, that they were continuing the traditions even with the generations that are newer to this side. There were elders who were dressed in white, as well as elders dressed in all black to really hold space. There was, of course, libations, there was Coca-Cola, there was push, which is like a sacred wine. There was lots of people as well. And it was such a huge space that by the time you got to the end of it, it was just one big altar, essentially. And then by the time you got there, you couldn't really speak because that was considered the most sacred place. You could see people coming there to make offerings to this massive altar, to release. Many people were crying, many people were, you could definitely tell this was a place that still held lots of magic. The energy was really, really high. As soon as I walked in, I was a bit overwhelmed by the energy that was there, and that was juxtaposed with the fact that as a tourist, which I believe, I was, and as were so many other people, there were also folks just walking around watching. And there were other people who were just tourists walking around watching, which was very different for me, but it did not seem to sway any of the people who were there, who knew their traditions, who came to practice, who were dedicated, who were in a deep meditation, almost in a trance-like state. And I thought that was very powerful, to notice that even though you have all these different eyes who are not from here looking at you, you are so grounded in your beliefs and your traditions that it doesn't faze you, that you are literally not perceiving anything else besides your offering, besides your family, besides the request that you are here to make. And so it was a pretty powerful experience. It was a little overwhelming, but again, I would not describe it as weird or interesting or primitive or savage, just because I have seen spaces like that where you have, a building that looks like, oh, this is just a church, but really it's something completely different. And that's all because many folks had to hide their traditions. And because of colonization, I think people still feel the need to hide their traditions, and people who aren't familiar with those traditions label them as primitive, as savage, as backwards, as weird, when in reality they are the closest practices to nature that we can get. In Chamula, particularly in this church, in this Iglesia, you could see every element of the world, of the ether, of every element that we use now. You could see it being used in every part of that building, in every part of whatever invocation was happening, and whatever part of sacrifice was being made. You could just see how nature was being infused throughout every tradition, and that was just so beautiful and powerful to me. You could hear many different languages that were not Spanish, that were not English, but were actually different dialects of Mayan there, and you could feel it. Even if you didn't quite understand everything that was being said or why, you could definitely feel that presence. And it was not anything that was needed to be feared or quote unquote dark or anything like that. It was just a very beautiful, overwhelming experience. And I was so surprised to go there and immediately feel like it was very familiar. And I think it's because of my ancestor who's been with me for a while, and just from my own practices that I know of from my line. Many of the things that I saw that were happening there are things that we do too. We may call it different things. We may use them for different reasons. We may do them in our home. or in a cemetery or in anywhere in the ocean. We have all these different ways of rituals and ceremonies that tend to overlap and be very similar. And so it was just very eye-opening to me to go there and not have the experience that most people have. and so I'm sharing this with you just because I wanted to offer this up, hopefully as another learning, that language means a lot. And just because something may be different to us doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be labeled as something that's inferior or something to be feared or something to be mocked or, you know, observed as if it's like in an exhibit or something like that. And I don't have all the answers about my ancestor who was here, you know, like what his name was when he was here, where he lived specifically when he was here, but I do know he is from Chamula, and there's more for me to learn while I'm still here. So I hope this was interesting. I'm going to be sharing more about my thoughts on de-appropriatizing spiritual practices and just ways to infuse what we may call equity into spiritual spaces, because the more and more I see, the more and more I'm realizing that in a lot of ways we're still perpetuating white supremacy in spiritual spaces, and that is almost contradictory, if not completely contradictory, to what spirituality is supposed to be. And so that is all I have for you today. I hope it was interesting. Leave a comment below if you have any specific questions. I didn't want this to be too long today. I just wanted to offer up a little bit about what I experienced at Chamula so that you know that I really am here to not only immerse myself, but take note and really see how we can recognize how many melanated cultures are very similar, instead of having this horizontal hostility and feeling like we have to compete and be so different. And so thank you all so much. I will be posting more soon. And for those of you who celebrate, have a good holiday. And I will talk to you soon.